Tonight we break down a story of political warfare tearing right through the heart of American military leadership. The news just dropped, and it's a bombshell that confirms every fear about the radical ideological transformation happening inside the Pentagon. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, the former Fox News host turned military chief, has abruptly, without public fanfare, fired the U.S. Navy Chief of Staff, Jon Harrison. This isn't just an HR shuffle. This is a clear, calculated move, the latest in a relentless campaign to purge the military establishment of anyone perceived as an impediment to the Trump administration's vision. Harrison was a key player, appointed only in January, but his tenure has ended in disgrace and secrecy, and the circumstances surrounding his exit speak volumes about the vicious internal battle for the soul of the Department of Defense. This is more than a firing. It's an execution of a political strategy. Let's look at the facts. Jon Harrison was not just some mid-level aide. He was the Chief of Staff to the Secretary of the Navy, a critical post central to shaping the branch's daily operations, policy, and, crucially, its budget. He had been working closely with Navy Secretary John Phelan, a man with no prior military experience but immense financial ties to the political machine, on what were described as broad changes within the Navy's budgeting offices. They were, according to reports, intentionally seeking to limit the power of the Navy Undersecretary, a position traditionally key to managing the branch's enormous fiscal portfolio. The timing here is everything. Harrison's removal comes just days after a major confirmation. Hung Chow, a former naval officer and conservative Republican, was finally confirmed as that very Navy Undersecretary. The internal logic is staggering. Harrison and Phelan were reportedly working against the incoming Undersecretary, actively reassigning top aides who were supposed to help Chow transition, all in a bid to dilute his influence before he even sat down at his desk. But now it's Harrison who is out, abruptly cut loose by his boss, Hegseth. Was this a course correction? A punishment for overreach? Or simply the most recent casualty in a chaotic political environment that devours its own? To understand the true weight of this action, you have to place it within the wider, deeply troubling context of Hegseth's time at the Pentagon. This single firing is not an isolated incident. It is part of a pattern of institutional destabilization that has been escalating since January. Think about the scale of this purge. Hegseth and the administration have fired more than half a dozen top generals in less than a year. They've explicitly targeted the highest echelons of leadership, mandating a shocking 20% cut of all four-star generals and admirals, an unprecedented demand that sends shivers down the spine of military analysts. And let's not forget the symbolic and strategic damage done by the removal of the only two women serving as four-star officers, or the shocking dismissal of Air Force General C.Q. Brown, Jr., the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and only the second black man to hold that role. This isn't efficiency. This is an ideological cleansing, a deliberate decapitation of the military's most experienced and diverse leadership structure, creating a vacuum of power that is being swiftly filled by political loyalists. And what is the stated motivation for all this chaos? It's been laid bare by Hegseth himself in an extraordinary, highly unusual speech he delivered to top military officials just days ago. The enemy, according to Hegseth, isn't across the sea. It's within. He railed against diversity and inclusion guidelines, claiming that the Department of Defense had become the woke department, a phrase that betrays a fundamental misunderstanding, or perhaps a willful contempt, for the institutions he now commands. This rhetoric isn't just cheap political talk. It is a direct assault on the principles of meritocracy and the need for a force that reflects the nation it protects. Veterans, the very people who have devoted their lives to service, reacted furiously to this address, seeing it not as leadership but as a deeply insulting, ignorant attack on the professionalism of the armed forces. They are rightly asking, how can a former cable news host be allowed to dismantle decades of military experience and strategic competence based on flimsy culture war talking points? So where does this leave the U.S. Navy? And where does it leave the Pentagon as a whole? The firing of Jon Harrison is the latest, clearest signal that the current administration views the military not as a nonpartisan defender of the nation, but as a political organization requiring total loyalty and ideological conformity. The removal of a chief of staff is the closing chapter on a power struggle, a declaration of victory by the political appointees over the entrenched professionals. The upheaval continues, and the question is no longer if the U.S. military is being transformed, but what it will look like when the dust finally settles. Will it be stronger, more focused, and more effective? Or will it be a hollowed-out echo of its former self, staffed by yes-men and weakened by the very ideological battles it was told to fight against? The events of this week suggest the latter.